Hello. I am with you again this morning. It's 8 o'clock Central Time, Pacific Time, 10 o'clock in Central Time Zone, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. Man, I'm so confused today. Drinking instant coffee again. Good morning, Mark. Today, I want to talk to you guys about EQ because I think it's a subject that keeps coming up, and I think sometimes you understand it. Sometimes it's easy to understand. Sometimes it's not that easy to understand. So what I want to do is break down EQ and hopefully give you a really good insight on what EQ, how it works, what it does, and then maybe even some questions at the end, how you can use it, the different applications you may use this sort of thing in. Okay, so per your request, I've got screenshots ready. Good morning, Craig. I've got not screenshots. I'm sharing a screen, so it may be a little clunky, a little messy to begin with. So I'm gonna put some octane in right here. This is the instant coffee. Yes, instant coffee that I had yesterday. I'm going to see if it makes me talk faster like it did yesterday. Okay, so let's talk about EQ. Okay, what is EQ? Basically, EQ is tone control. When you see treble and bass, those are EQs. It's a certain kind of EQ. They can be handy sometimes, and other times you need to be more surgical, more precise with it. So I'm going to walk you through the different types of EQ, what the terminology that you may hear surrounding EQ may be. So and I'll take some questions at the end. Okay, so let's talk about EQ. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to flip over real quick and let me, I won't be able to see the comments. So I'm going to freestyle for a little while. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is Reaper. It really doesn't matter about the brand it is. Okay, hang on just a second. I'm going to look on Facebook real quick and YouTube and see about comments to make sure that you guys can hear me okay. Because like I said, I can't see my screen here. So let's go to Mix Coach and let's look at the live thing. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm seeing your comments now on another page. Okay, let's talk about EQ. A lot of times what you'll hear on EQ is you'll hear an octave EQ. So let's talk about what an octave is. So the human ear can hear roughly from, depending on your age, mileage may vary, can hear basically from 20 hertz or 20 cycles per second to about 20,000 cycles per second. So that's about 9 octaves, right? So this is a graphic EQ that I've got at the top here. This is it's called a graphic EQ. And it starts roughly around 20 hertz, this is 32. And basically this goes up in octaves. So every time you take 32 hertz and you double it, you get 64 hertz. So this is what's considered an octave, okay? Now, an octave is basically double the frequency. And if you're into music, you know what an octave is. It's the difference between one note in one register and the same note in the next register up. That's considered an octave. Well, it also works in equalization. And this is where you can boost or cut at a certain frequency, okay? We are boosting and cutting at 32 hertz. Now, it covers quite a bit of area. It covers down. I mean, what would be an octave down? If you're paying attention in the comments here, what would be an octave down from 32 hertz? Just really quick. I think there may be some delay time. So I'll go ahead and tell you. I'm going to give you the answer. It's 16, because half of 32 is 16, right? And 16 is roughly just a little bit below where the human ear can actually, or is reported to hear, right? I think, like I said, your mileage may vary here. So what we've got here is an octave. We've got a volume, basically volume control of a sound that's one octave apart. So you can control the very lows, and then you can, as you go up an octave, you can see that you can control. You can cut or boost in each octave, right? So if you want a little bit more high end or more tone control, more treble, that's where this would happen up here, is in the high section. 1K is kind of in the middle. That's that tone usually here when back in the old days when yep, Samuel got it. 16 hertz. So back in the old days, you'd hear a 1K or 500 hertz tone. Boop. That's this. That's that sine wave in this register here. Okay, so when you want treble, you push this up, and a lot of people will take these and they'll push these up to give themselves more perceived high end, because you're boosting that particular range of frequencies. Okay, when you want bass, you do just the opposite. You go down here to the bottom here, and you boost or cut the bass. Okay, so now let me flatten the EQ here. So that just put everything back at 0. Now this is 10 bands, right? So we've got a band at 32, which covers an octave this way and basically an octave this way, right? So 32 to 64, and they're taking a wide range around with them. So they're not just boosting that one frequency, they're boosting a range of frequencies around that, okay? Now, how many of you have ever heard of a 1/3 octave? Has anybody ever thought about what that means about a 1/3 octave? 31 band EQ. I'm going to show you where that comes from. If we go to 31 bands, now you notice, let's see, that is not what I expected to see. Maybe I just need to refresh. Okay, we're still in 10 bands. So if we go, for some reason, it's wanting to stay with 10 bands here. I don't know why my screen keeps changing like that. So let's pull up this graphic EQ again, and let's try to see if we can make it stick with 31 bands. Okay, so let's just create another graphic EQ. Wow, this is every broadcaster's nightmare, right? You can't keep the screen. Sorry, guys. Really sorry about this. Okay, let's just go back to this one. 31 bands. I'll just give you the quick answer. If I could make it stick to, it would be 3 bands per every octave, or a third. Each frequency range would be a third of an octave. So you have to do the math here, and I'm not great at math here, but you'd take an octave and divide it by 3, and each one of those frequencies would get a band also. So now you're more precise. You're getting not only 32 and covering an octave here, what you're doing is covering just a third of that octave. So that's where 31 bands or third octave comes from, because each fader gets a third of an octave, and that happens to be around 31 bands. So these graphic EQs are pretty handy for ringing out a monitor or finding a problem frequency. Say your microphone is feeding back in your worship center or in your concert or at your, usually that feedback will come from, it'll have a pitch to it, a tone to it, right? And that tone will be, you'll know that that's around 500 to 1K right there. But if it starts ringing back really high, a lot of times you can get a frequency analyzer, and you can tell, and it's built into a lot of DAWs now, where you can tell which frequency is running away. Well, all you do is find that frequency or the band that's closest to that frequency and pull it down. Okay. So that's graphic EQ. Okay. So there's another kind of EQ here. This is called parametric EQ. Okay. Parametric EQ is like graphic EQ, except now you don't have to go with the pre-selected 1/3 of an octave frequency to boost or cut, and whatever what we call a bandwidth that's included with that. Now we can select it. Okay, so remember, and this has 4 selectable bands of EQs. Okay, so what we do, like if we go to this one here, and as you can see here, we are sweeping and selecting, and we could be a lot more precise. And even you can even tell here on this EQ, which I think is pretty cool. You can tell the note, even that's an A, and it's in that octave. So an A sharp, there's a B, there's a C. So if you've ever wondered what 1K was, what the note of 1K, it's between a B and a C, right? it's a like a B. It's like a B flat or something like that. It's a flat B. It's not a B flat. But anyway, so you can see that in this, as you see, this 1 is moving as I sweep it down. So a lot of EQs will give you anywhere from 1 to 2 to 6 selectable frequencies. I can leave that one alone and go to the second one and do that. Okay. So now, if I did a band, basically what this is going to do, if I go back to 1 here, this will allow me to boost or cut that 1 frequency. So let's enable it so we can see what it's doing here. Okay, you remember 2 days ago we talked about a high pass filter and a low pass filter, and I know that when we were talking about it, you guys wanted to see more of a graphical interface. Now, this is a good way to look at it. So if I selected high pass and I just selected this, you can see that it's completely getting rid of everything below a certain frequency. Now, it has a curve to it, but everything under here is basically all gone, right? So this is how most microphones pick up. And then I was talking about number 1 with vocals. You know, this is around 120 or so. There's nothing down here that's usable from a vocal. Electric guitars, same thing. Right around here, there's nothing down here that's really going to add to your mix. So we pass it, we band pass it, we high pass it, okay? So you can see that this high pass filter passes all of these highs. Same thing with a low pass filter. It does it except on the other end, right? Now you can do this, but you won't hear any sound, right? So you would use a low pass filter for something that had super highs, maybe something that was too sibilant, or maybe there's a hiss coming from something like a bass guitar. There's not a ton of top end that you need from a bass guitar, but you may have a noisy cable or a noisy direct box, and it may be sitting there going, I don't know if you can hear this, but maybe hissing, right? Well, use a filter on it. Just filter all that stuff out, and nobody will really be the wiser. Okay. So now, if we're talking about a band, now we can take this and select what we boost or cut. So if you look, if we were to set this up and pretend that this was this other equalizer and we would push it up, this is what it's doing, right? It's grabbing some frequencies below, but it's peaking at where you've got the band on the parametric EQ. This is pretty much what you're doing to the signal, except these are not selectable. They're pre-selected for you, okay? Now, one cool thing about this is, like, if you don't want it to be that wide, you can go down here to the bandwidth or the octave, and you can tighten it up, right? Like that's surgical right there. That's like selecting one particular frequency. If you have a frequency running away or feeding back in your live environment, this is a killer way to grab it. Okay. The other one is more all-purpose. This is more surgical. Okay. So notch filter does the same thing. Notch filter, it doesn't give you how much, it just completely takes it out. Okay. So if you've got say you've got maybe a 60 hertz hum, and you got something like that's not a bass guitar, because you couldn't really do this to a bass guitar and it sound really good. But if you've got a 60 hertz hum, why not take one of these EQs and set it to 60 hertz? There's nothing going to take my, I didn't put 60 in there, 60.0. Now, okay, still don't want to do it. Okay, I'm just going to grab this then. How's that? 60 hertz right here. There's close to 60, and that would take out the hum, right? Okay, so if you wanted to notch it out, that's what you could do. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff, but I'm going to show you a low shelf. Okay, now this is basically a tone control on your stereo system, right? This is what you do when you just want to add general all-purpose, more lows and more highs. You can grab a low shelf. And this is indicated on EQs. Like if you use the SSL EQ, you can select between a bell or a shelf, or you can, it defaults to the shelf like this, what I'm about to show you. But you can make it go to a bell. Now the bell is what we just showed, but this is a bell right here. So That's a very narrow bell, but that is a bell. And it looks like a bell, right? That looks like a bell. That's why they call it a bell curve. Okay, but if you wanted to do a shelf, this is what happens. It starts to go up at the frequency you select, and then it goes up and it selects every frequency underneath that, and it brings it up. So if you've got a bass guitar player and you just want more lows in it, you are now adding all of that sound. You're boosting all of that sound that maybe you don't want, that's muddying up the low end. So here's a combination that's pretty handy to know. Let's just say a shelf EQ, you want more tone, but you also want to take out that low end stuff too, okay? So select another frequency, let's just say 2, and let's do a high pass filter on that one, and we'll turn it on. And now if you notice, I've got the shelf happening here, but when it gets past the point of the low frequencies that I want to keep, it's doing this little bump right here. This is a characteristic of some of the, like an SSL EQ. Sometimes what it'll do is it will boost the frequency that you are boosting, and then, or actually when you do a filter, a lot of times what they'll do, this is the vintage filter that you see people talk about. What it'll do is it'll filter it out, but it'll bump it just before it filters. Okay, I don't think this one has that on there, but just know that this is a good combination right here. Like let's say you used the shelf EQ, which I don't really recommend a lot unless you use a filter with it. But you've got the frequency where it sounds nice and round, but now it's muddy in the low end. Just grab a filter and put it on there. Okay, a high pass filter. We learned about that earlier. Okay, so let's do let's go back to this one here. This is the low shelf. Let's look at a high shelf, and let's look at what it does. It adds a little shelf, right? This is the elevator button. Like, so if you just want everything louder, turn the shelf on and turn it up like that. Not a very good way to do it. Not a very good way to do it. But if you're just cranking EQ knobs and you don't know why you're getting the sound you do, hopefully from watching this you will now. So this is a shelf, right? So this is basically, if I were to take, let's just go back here. Let's go to the low shelf on this one, and we boosted it. And then we went up here to the top and we did a high shelf on this one, and we enabled it and we boosted it up. Look what we've got here. We've got this basically a smiley face EQ, right? We're boosting all the lows and highs. A lot of people will do this, right? But here's the problem with doing EQ like this. You just add some lows, add some highs, and you're good to go, right? Not the best way to approach it, because look at the curve you've got. You've basically got a curve where you're subtracting at 1K. The problem with this is now you're boosting all of your level, and you may be clipping the next thing in line. So when you talk about things like gain staging, have you ever heard that phrase before? And maybe it confused you, or maybe you know exactly what gain staging is. This is a gain staging no-no right here, because what happens is you've got a lot of lows boosted, right? You've got a lot of highs boosted. Now, most of your sound is louder because you've boosted everything but the mid-range, okay? This is not the way to do this. The way to do this is I'm going to make these inactive here. I'm going to take one, and I'm going to make them inactive. And I'm going to do the same thing with band 2, except I'm going to do it a lot more efficiently, and I'm not going to be messing up my my sound as much, okay? This is the same curve, right? Except it's not louder. It's a little softer now. It's actually better. So if you're boosting the lows and boosting the highs, that's why I always say subtract. Find the frequency that bothers you first and pull that out, because everything's going to sound, it's like, louder always seems better. Your human ear is always going to perceive louder as better, right? You take one mix of a song and you listen to it, and then you say, okay, listen to this mix, and you boost it up 1 dB, 1.5 dB, 2 dB. Wow, that mix really said this mix is better than that one. It's just the way we're made. We perceive louder as better. So when you go and you do an EQ curve like this one, you're going to really think you've done something. Like it's louder, it sounds better, right? Would you agree? And most people are going to say, yeah, I agree, it's louder, it's not, it sounds nice. Nice lows, nice highs. Somebody says more lows. Angel, Adam. So you got more highs, more lows, it's louder, but you're clipping most likely the next phase. Or let's just say you're doing this, but now you're running your fader down like -6. But look, we've got 60 dB added to the lows, 60 dB added to the top, to the highs. Now that's probably 60 dB of gain, right? Because they're not overlapping. This is not the best way to do this. If you're a ninja mixer, this is what you do first. You cut first, okay? All right, so that's parametric, this little parametric EQ and a little graphic EQ, and hopefully those two things showed you a little bit more. Maybe you have a little bit more of an understanding. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to go back to just me. Hello, and I'm going to look at the comments here. Okay, so if you've got any questions about EQ, I would love to take them right now. But just to recap, we covered what a graphic EQ is. A graphic EQ, just to recap, it will allow you in ever how many bands, like you have, for you guys who mix a lot, you may have seen the API 560. It's a graphic EQ. I'm sorry. It's a graphic EQ. Get my terminology mixed up. It's a graphic EQ. It's a vertical, and you slide the lows and highs left to right, but it does the same thing. It's just that, it's a Class A discrete circuit. Sounds really good. A lot of people use it. I've used it on snare before. Sounds really good. But the first thing, you don't want to boost a bunch on that. Really, you want to cut if you can, mostly. Now do whatever you want to. But if you boost a lot of frequencies there, and let's just say you love that sound, just make sure that whatever's coming up after it doesn't see the volume change, right? Unless you're just trying to be, unless you're trying to get some distortion, which, is not totally uncommon. But so the graphic EQ is pre-selected bands, and you can boost or cut. So you're taking a sound and you're cutting that sound up into other different sounds by the octave, right? So if you had 10 bands, it would be 1 band per octave. So you can actually boost the mids or cut the mids or boost the highs or cut the highs, but it's all pre-selected and pre-selected for you, right? But the graphic EQ, if you will allow you to grab any band and sweep it, decide how much of that band you want to take out or boost. So we learned what a shelf EQ was. We learned what a bell curve was, a shelf, a parametric, and a graphic EQ. Okay. That's not all I know about that, but I think that's enough to clear up some stuff, hopefully. So yeah, I'm taking questions if you have them. If you don't, we'll call it a day, and I will drink the rest of this instant coffee. Okay, so tomorrow, okay, let's see. Craig says Pultec Style EQ boost and attenuation disband dense would be great. Not sure exactly what the question is there. Maybe you can give it another go on that. Do's and don'ts. Okay. Dense and do's and don'ts. Okay. Okay. Let me tell you a little Pultec Style EQ. Now I'll be the first to admit, those Pultec EQs, they look a little scary. They sound fantastic, but they look scary. But I will tell you that a trick that I do, and it does this sort of the same thing here. If you, it's confusing because you can boost and cut the same frequency. That's what makes it so confusing. And I don't know what the guys were the engineers, the rocket scientists that came up with that thing were thinking. It sounds beautiful, but there's a trick that I use on the kick drum a lot, and that is to take that Pultec EQ and boost it at like 20 or 30 hertz, which is that, you remember the Kevin McManus thing where he boosts 30 hertz? But you can also cut or attenuate the same frequency. So if you boost 30 and cut 30, what ends up happening is what I showed you when you use like a high pass filter and a shelf EQ at the same time. I think it's just my thought. Now I'm not an authority on this Pultec Style EQ. But if you boost and cut, it does a curve like what we talked about, where you shelf it and then you cut it, and it does this, and it just does the most beautiful 30 hertz curve you've ever heard, and it just like really beefs up a kick drum. You should try it sometime. Grab a Pultec Style EQ and grab the 30 band, and then boost it and cut it about the same. So yeah, try that. Let me know how it works out for you. Okay, Mark says, thoughts on being either a visual mixer, fab filter, or the SSL like you use where your ears do the mixing. I think, Mark, when I started mixing, and people who are used to an SSL EQ, I think we're just used to kind of knowing what those knobs do, what they're supposed to do, and then kind of just going for it and using your ears. I do love seeing a visual representation of what I'm doing, but here's where you can be led astray by looking. You remember the McGurk effect that I was talking about, like I teach all the time, where if you're mixing a vocal and you can see their mouth move, your eyes kind of play into what your ears are hearing. So there is a tutorial on the McGurk effect. And just to break that down, they put a person on screen that was just moving their mouth, but someone started saying pa, pa, pa as they move their mouth. And then somebody said ba, 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 or fa, fa, fa. And your mouth looks exactly the same, but your ears are hearing different consonants, therefore defining what you're hearing, right? The person's mouth is moving the same. So using the McGurk effect with that, your eyes will play into what you're hearing. Sometimes you can, and I've done this before, I've got a lot of years of experience, but it still happens. So beware. When you are EQing something, and sometimes it's in bypass, but you push it up and you go, oh yeah, that's good. That's because you've seen yourself add EQ and you know what you should be hearing, but sometimes you're not hearing that, okay? So when you're doing that, try not to use your eyes quite as much. Now, on the inverse side of that, the beautiful thing about being able to see what you're doing is sometimes, like on the new R channel or the EQs from Waves, or they're building in RTAs, which is a real-time analyzer, which basically it takes the signal that's coming through it and it's saying, here's a graphical representation of what we see as frequencies. You're hearing a feedback, you'll see a little peak happen at a certain frequency. Find that frequency, pull it down, and your eyes have helped you quickly solve a problem of feedback, right? So, so using your eyes and your ears, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I do both. I just love the way the SSL EQ sounds. Not so much the EQ. I love the way the channel sounds. I love the way the compressor sounds, if I'm being honest. I love the way the filters and the compressor sound. Now, I'm going all over the place on the SSL. There's just a lot of voodoo that I love about that SSL channel strip, the E channel. But there are other EQs that I use, like the Waves R channel, where if I want to be more precise and I want to see what I'm doing, and I want to be, I want to really dial in that frequency or boost that fundamental frequency of a snare drum, I don't use the SSL for that. I use the Waves for that. So there's no right or wrong way, Mark, about being a visual mixer guy. I do like seeing what I'm doing, but sometimes sometimes those knobs go to 10 for a reason, but we're scared to push it. We're scared to push it up because our eyes are kind of keeping us from going that far. I heard a story one time where Chris Ordalgie came to Nashville, and it was my friend Terry McMillan, who's now passed away. He was telling me that that Chris Ordalgie did a rough mix on a song that he had just played harmonica on, and he said to watch him mix, he was cranking knobs all the way. He would take the high knobs, turn it all the way, the lows, turn it all the way up, turn it all the way down. So he didn't care that it stopped at 10. He went all the way to 10, And if it was like the what's that movie that has that he had all of his amps modified to go to 11? That's a great line. So if your EQ could be modified to go to 11, right? So anyway, Mark, hopefully that was helpful. Samuel said that high pass and shelf trick is ingenious. It'll get you a lot of mileage, but keep in mind too that when you filter, you're getting that a little bell curve at the bottom with an added shelf to it. So it kind of cleans it up. I love that trick too. I think it adds a lot of contoured low end to your signal. Okay, I'm gonna take a couple more questions, and then we'll call it a day. Tomorrow, what I thought about doing, Spinal Tap. That's it. Yeah, this amp's modified to 11. I love that line. It's funny. So tomorrow, I think I may. I'm kind of putting this out here. I don't have it all set up yet, but I think I may try to listen to some mixes tomorrow. So if you have a mix that you want to listen to, come on the show tomorrow, and what we'll do, it may be a little clunky, even more clunky than me trying to get the right screen on the EQ, right? But I may listen to some mixes tomorrow. And if not, if we don't get that worked out, then what I'll do is I'll continue with this EQ series. Okay, guys, been fun hanging out with you again. It's been 32 minutes since we started, and this is not as long as say a broadcast or an interview, but hopefully this has been helpful. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe this channel first and foremost. But if you want to get more in the weeds or in the details, go and check out mixcoach.com. I've got a free resource for you here. And if you want 3 of my best mixing strategies, tips that can get your mixes sounding better by tonight, by doing these 3 little things, you should check this out. Just go to mixcoach.com. And there's a button right there that says get the resource. So go grab it. It's I think you'll like it. Okay. 3 last comments that came in. Thanks. How do I submit a song? Okay, let me do this. And you may have to give me a couple of minutes, but let me go take a look at, I started setting this up yesterday. You know what? Here's what we'll do. I will put the show link up in just a few minutes. So subscribe to this channel, whether you're on Facebook, you either need to like it or follow this page. You go to YouTube and you like and subscribe. And when I put this link up, I will put a submission link that's temporary. It's just until tomorrow, so that you can submit a song to me. And what we'll do, I can't guarantee how good the mix is going to sound on your end, but I know that, it's like listening to a normal mix on my end. So I'll give you some quick feedback. Just a couple of caveats. I'm not familiar with the source material that you're mixing. So the things I say about your mix may not be about your mix. It may be about the way it's recorded. And I love doing that. And hopefully I can help. So subscribe, like, get the notifications, and when you see that I'm going live tomorrow, there will be a link in the description. Click the link, and I'll figure out a way for us to submit a mix. Okay, I can't listen to a ton of them tomorrow because I just don't have that much time, and I think you'd probably get bored with it. So I'm gonna dive deep into a couple of mixes if you guys have them. Okay, so be on the lookout for that. Like and subscribe. Go to mixcoach.com if you want some more resources. And we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Have a good one. Bye.